grazing, causing water to flow out the backs. We did it. It's pretty amazing technology, but I think you're going to be surprised at the studies, okay? Because I was, and I think Andy was too. Yeah. But you also will find that using remote sensing, we're actually going to see probably the state of Tennessee may want to go back and look at some of their park boundaries because using technology, we were able to find out that there may be a little bit of clear cut that rock runs in some state parks, so that nobody knows about. So I'll leave that to Andy. This is Andy Carroll with Skytec. They were the lead on doing this with some geomorphology folks out of the plant. So Andy,
correct. Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name's Andy Carroll. Thank you, Chuck. It's a great project to work on. Excited to share the results of everything we did over the last year. Briefly, for those of you that haven't had a chance to meet with you yet, I've worked at UTC for about 18 years, and 6 years ago started a company in Chattanooga that was using remote sensing technology and mapping and GIS. I'm a geologist by training and then got into natural resource management over the last 20 years now. But what I'm going to show you today is really kind of the culmination of a lot of energy that we've been putting in the last 2 years on using satellite technology, and in particular small satellites that can capture more frequently, and then being able to take products from those types of captures and use them for creating land cover data, for having more of a real-time feel of what's happening on the landscape. And then we can apply that, in the case of this project, to water quality, to modeling. So we're not hydrologists at Skytec, but I partnered with some really great hydrologists out of the Atlanta area with Geosyntec. It's a great consultancy. And so they did the numbers. We'll go through the numbers today. It's important for me to report the numbers, but I am not the expert in the numbers. So I'm going to try to interpret for all of us. But feel free while I go through all of this to ask any questions at any point. Kind of the agenda for today is we'll briefly again hit those goals and objectives and go straight to the key findings. What did we get out of this study? And then I'm going to show you the remote sensing methods that we use to some of the new products. That's kind of what we're really interested in, is how do we take this new state-of-the-art mapping technology and begin to use it for resource management, especially at the local level. That's what I'm really excited about, looking at a county here and how can we integrate this into better managing our resources at the county level. And then also we'll look at the hydro and the sediment modeling. So all those detailed tables and charts and great statistics, but we'll go through it pretty quickly. But I do want to give it its due and the time for sure. And then I've got a live demo of the application that we built, which is kind of the culmination of all of this. So briefly, the goals and objectives, we wanted to identify areas of rock harvesting and clear cutting using remote sensing and GIS. So again, remote sensing, that can be everything from you taking a picture, a surveyor with a laser scanner or a total station, or a satellite, several hundred miles up. It's from a micro scale all the way up to macro scale, which is what the satellite's doing. And then the next piece of the goal and objective here is to use change detection models to identify areas that changed between 2016 and 2020 in the county. And then we're going to take that same satellite imagery and create new land cover data. Some of you worked with land cover data from the National Land Cover Data Set. It's a great product, but it only comes out about every 5 years. With this new technology, we could do a daily land cover data if you wanted to. So you can have a pulse, a live pulse of what's happening on the landscape. And then what we see a lot of exciting opportunities is then to take that and pipe it into the hydro models and the sediment models. So the other objectives, I mentioned the hydro and sediment load modeling. So we selected 4 sub-watersheds here in the county. We'll walk through those. We tried to pick a reference watershed that was mostly covered with vegetation, and then some of the urban watersheds in South Pittsburgh and Kimball where we had some of the big flooding events. So can we look and see if over the last 5 years, if additional land use change may be influencing, increased runoff and increased sediment? That's what those models are going to help us get to. And then the other objectives were to describe the findings and then also to have this application that I mentioned that brings it kind of all together, lets you review the data. So here are the study areas that we picked out, and we actually ran the imagery over the whole county, but for the hydro modeling, we ended up picking Mullins Cove as sort of a reference. It's managed state forest area, protected area. And then we also picked Pryor Cove because we knew that there was some rock harvesting going on there. And we also had some forestry activity in the upper watershed up on the mountain. And then we went with Happy Hollow and Poplar Springs. So essentially the South Pittsburgh side of the mountain coming down, where we knew we had some historical big flooding events, 2013, and then some of the more recent ones that we had related with the tornado and all those storms that came through. So jumping right to the key findings here, clear cutting rock harvesting activities are observed and can be delineated with the satellite. I call it high cadence. It's just, again, it's being captured very frequently, and it's medium resolution to high resolution. So from, in this case, 4 meter each pixel, and the imagery is basically, if you line up a couple basketball goals into a square, that's kind of the area, the footprint that we're capturing on the ground. And then also this imagery can be used to generate all the land cover layers to monitor for the change detection and additionally permit compliance. So what we see, and I'll dive into this a whole lot more, but this example in these change detection models that I'm going to show you, we're calling this a change detection visualization model. So anything in a magenta or pink color is something that had vegetation removed or land disturbance activity over a period of time. So, maybe June and then July, or in this case, 2018 to 2020. And so any of these black areas are your impervious surfaces, your buildings, your infrastructure, and then green areas are where we've got vegetation growth. So you can actually look at, in this example, we had a timber harvest and then regrowth, and then we had activity development, some timber harvest here, and then agricultural harvesting. So with this kind of approach, you can quantify and you can very specifically delineate and pull out areas that are changing. So the other key findings, and this really gets to the heart of the modeling, is that clear cutting and agricultural harvesting were the land use activities that most greatly influenced the outputs of our models, the sediment and hydrological models. So we didn't really see as much of the rock harvesting. I think it's the footprint and the watershed scale that are factors there. But we definitely, could see effects when we had clear cuts and a lot of agricultural harvesting on the landscape. So I hit the second bullet point there, I already mentioned, the rock harvesting activities definitely didn't have that same level of impact in the models. Let's see, modeling results for the subwatersheds also indicated that increased flooding and impaired water quality from sediment may not be directly attributable to land use change only. So when we begin to dive into the numbers, there's minimal land use change between 2016 and 2020, at least not enough to where it could be a significant factor in increasing runoff and sediment using the models and the approaches we did in this particular study. And then what we did see was an overall increase in rainfall. So though that doesn't explain, those significant events where we had, huge amounts of microburst rainfall and after the tornadoes or some of the storms, but overall from, our models, even though we had land cover change, we had an increase in precipitation. And so, even with that increase in precipitation, we didn't see a significant increase in flow or sediment. And then the last piece, the subwatersheds that documented extreme flooding events did not demonstrate significant land use. So again, what I just mentioned before, next to South Pittsburgh, on the side of the mountain, we really didn't see much land use change there between 16 and 20. And towards the end of this, I can share a little bit more of thoughts on, going over a longer period of time and how that might potentially, show an increase in sediment if we were to look at a 20-year period in land use changes. So I'm going to jump those are the findings. Here's the methodology, and this is just a really neat graphic. So this is the group that we're working with, and their small satellite constellation. And this just kind of shows you where the technology is for being able to capture the entire surface of the Earth every day now. So I think they have upwards of over 150 satellites in this constellation, ranging from the 4 meter, so we can get, near infrared data, and all the way down to 50 centimeters. So that lets us do all of our land cover and vegetation assessments and all of that on a daily basis. I'm about to cook my video card here. So the imagery products that we used, what I was showing you was the planet products. These are the two in the middle here, the PlanetScope and SkySat. And then we also use Sentinel data, which is free. It's a 10 meter resolution. Traditional land cover data is 30 meter resolution. So these products are a lot tighter, give us more definition. You can use it to interpret and lift out features a lot more than we could with Landsat data, which is the older, traditional free data product. We looked at using Worldview, which is another commercial product. It was just price prohibitive, but it gets you down to 30 centimeter with all the different bands of light. Here's an example of the 4 meter. This is from September 2021, right there at the Kimball exit. You see Jasper Highlands being built out in phases. And if we go back and look at 2016, same capture, we don't have as much development. And this is just the red, green, blue, the traditional visual product, which we can do a lot with, but really what we like to do is get in and get all that near infrared and all the other stuff that allows us to do the vegetation index models and all kinds of other models. So this is 50 centimeter product that we tasked right there at the Kimball exit, and we just happened to catch a day when Battle Creek was backed up quite a bit. But everything, what you see with the near infrared, the vegetation actually kind of bounces the near infrared off a lot more if it's a healthy, vibrant, something growing with a lot of photosynthesis. And when we compare that to another image where the activity is less, we can figure out, okay, this is stressed, or vegetation has been removed, or this field has been plowed, or there's a building construction, something that disturbed the ground. And so, without going into detail here, there's a lot of different bands that we can use to, and so really what we're trying to do is take that and put it into a process that, the hydrologist, in this example, can take and have an updated land cover data set. So again, it's that idea of making a more frequent input into all your models. So you're fine tuning your models. You can couple that with updated, getting people out in the field at the same time, because you have more chance to coordinate the model with the actual observation on the ground. And so I think that's where the future of all this is definitely headed. So you've heard a lot about land cover. I'll finally show you what land cover looks like here. So again, in this project, we took 2016, 2018, and 2020. We classified it into standard land cover classes like urban area, agricultural area, evergreen, deciduous forest, mixed forest, wetland. And then we look for changes between those classes over time. And then also in the models, they look at the distribution of all those different classes, and each kind of use has a different factor for how much water runs off a forest versus running off of a street or off of a plowed field. How much soil can come off of an exposed field versus a grass covered field. So that's where all the numbers that go into the models that we'll look at are essentially driven by this land cover data. So for our project, we got decent, I would love to have it at 90 to 100% accuracy, but some of the wetlands and the shrub down around Battle Creek and the Sequatchie River, they made it kind of tricky. And those were our poorest performing classes that we got, differentiating between what's a shrub, forest, and then what's actually a wetland, which that's pretty standard with any of this kind of land cover data. Those are always the ones where you have to cross-reference other data sets like the National Wetland Index or hydrography data to help classify that. So I've mentioned change detection a couple times here. Excuse me. This is a great example. This is actually down in the valley. Looking at the image here at the bottom, this is taking that satellite imagery and then creating it's called a normalized difference vegetation index, so NDVI. Areas in red, they're more impervious, bare soil. Green are happy trees, happy plants, happy fields. So we can see the difference. In this case, we're documenting, a lot of activity with some road building and housing, some sort of activity. So again, beginning to take that more frequent data and then automating, lifting out that change is really kind of what this technology allows us to do. So I already mentioned before, the green areas are going to represent your growth areas. The magenta is where either harvest activity or some sort of road building or construction activities going in place. And so we can take that out, we can create the land cover off of this, or we can measure and quantify how much area was changed over that given period of time. So this is over North Suck Creek, Big Fork, the other side, so eastern area of the county. Excuse me. And what we're seeing here, this is an area where we got a lot of forestry activity. And so it's a great example of one of these change detection models. So in 2018, we had a recent cut. And then by 2020, which I think it's kind of hard to see the labels right here, the image in the middle is 2020. And so what we're able to do is document, the regrowth of the section that was timbered. And then in 2020, we had some new thinning occurring here. And then we have the road building network. And again, just all of that detail. We even have some houses, some lawns, some new things that popped up. So we can capture all of that and convert it either into the land cover data for the modeling, or just it's useful information on its own as well. So another example of this, and the changes I'm showing you here, this is 2018 to 2020. So Jasper Highlands, we can see the different phases coming in. Looks like in 2018, my first image, this phase already existed, but it had just recently been cut. And so by 2020, after I do the change detection, we have green coming in where that phase is revegetating, the road right away, everything got nice grass on it. Each one of these pink dots is a new house that was built between 2018 and 2020. And then we've got the clearing for the new phase showing up here. Also importantly here, we have a rock harvesting activity in an area that's permitted. And the footprint pretty much was the same. There's just a little bit of activity right around here on the edge of this, but this is, where some of the stone for the mountain, for the development, I believe, is coming from. Savage Gulf State Natural Area, the green boundary here. That's, again, GIS layers aren't survey grade boundaries, but I would probably go check this corner, because somebody timbering, we're able to document that pretty well. We also got, the regrowth of some of these forested areas, and then some agricultural, activity. And then again, this looks like a thinning that had regrowth activity. So all that to say, the first couple objectives, can we detect, cutting, thinning, and then even the rock harvesting with the technology? Yes. So now how do you make it usable? Well, we have the land cover data that we hand off to the models, but then we can also lift out these areas using some of the new technology, software, machine learning. You can actually lift out and create a GIS layer just for the areas that changed. So that way I don't have to hand off all the imagery. I can just go straight to the GIS folks and they've got a perfect boundary of the area that changed. So that's the background of the technology and kind of the two different big products we get out of it, the the land cover data, and then being able to monitor. I'm going to dive now into the actual analysis here. So this is the application of that technology for the sediment and the hydrology analysis. So again, the purpose of this is to gauge the effect and evaluate whether land use change from 2016 to 2020 increased runoff, stream, just overall surface hydrology, and also the sediment load associated with that. We wanted to look at pre and post development sediment loading. And so, in 2016, if we had significant clear cuts or rock harvesting areas that were detected, do our models show that impacted, the predicted amount of volume runoff or the sediment load associated with that? And again, here are the subwatersheds that we selected: Happy Hollow, Poplar Springs, Prior Cove, and Mullins Cove. Let's see. So again, the land use change analysis, both forestry and rock harvesting activities were detected. They had also, we've had this kind of activity going on in the region for a long time. So it wasn't wasn't something brand new that just happened over this 5-year period, but still, can we measure the degree to which it's occurring? And then with the models, determine whether it was significant as being a driver in increasing sediment runoff. Here's the land cover data. This is looking at Poplar Springs. So the image on your left is 2016, image on the right, 2020. And most importantly, we have these tables which are showing the percentage of the land cover types. And so, we really don't see a big change. We got actually a little bit of an increase in barren, which means in this case, it was the agricultural fields that were harvested down here in the valley. And so there was, at the time of this imagery, there was exposed soil on the surface because it had recently been harvested. But we don't see any major changes, any major clear cuts. We have, in 2016, we had some forestry activity in the upper watershed. And then we're detecting that that's regrowing, and actually part of that shifted from shrubland over to a forest. So according to our classification, it's starting to grow, starting to become more of a forest. So other than that, we don't have any big glaring major land use change in Poplar Springs there. Happy Hollow, again, just right above South Pittsburgh. This is a very small watershed. And again, back up real quick. We use the state's latest LIDAR, the 3D data, to actually go through and classify these really small, high-resolution watersheds. So it gives us a really nice level of detail, especially for these smaller ones like Happy Hollow. But again, same thing here. I apologize, this table is looking blurry for some reason. But not a lot of change. From developed, that's probably within the error range of the classification. So not much change there. Again, we have some agricultural activity, down closer to the river where we have some soil that's exposed, but nothing major between shifting in any of these classes here. And then Prior Cove. So we do have some detected rock harvesting that came in, but it's such a small footprint. It's either barren or what we have the developed category. It's really not much of an increase when you look at the entire watershed. When we look at up on top of the mountain for Prior Cove, we had shrubland from some previous timber harvests. Then these are beginning to regrow, so they're coming in as an increase in forest. But no major clear cuts or anything that we were picking up in this that might have impacted model. And then Mullins Cove, this one's interesting. We actually do have some forestry activity, and we have some cutting and some thinning that occurred between 2016 and 2020. And so this is one where we do have an increase in the barren category, and then a little bit of a decrease in the shrubland category. So thinning. but it's still mostly a natural, protected area for the most part, except for just the very northern tip of that watershed. So without diving too much into all the methodology here, but I do want to give it its due. The USDA Urban Hydrology for Small Watershed Technical Report was used as a reference. So we're going to take the land cover classes that we have from all those examples, and we're going to, basically align them with categories, different factors for flow and runoff, and then also erosion. And so that's what these curve numbers are. And I'll show you a table in just a minute that has all the curve numbers matched up with the land cover classes. And then, they take that, run it through HydroCAD, which is a program that'll give the peak flow rates. And then pretty much taking the average 1 year, 24-hour rainfall event volumes and running that across that model that's fine-tuned with that new land cover data. So just on this one, I'll show you, these are the soil groups. So this is taking our land cover classes. They assign a soil group, and then that has according to that USDA, the technical report, it has a class that it's matched with, which then gives you, a factor to multiply by the acreage to come up with these watershed-based curve numbers. So basically, it's that times the amount of rainfall that we're getting is going to give us our prediction. But the composite curve is really kind of the main number in itself. Same thing for Poplar Springs. So we had 61 for Happy Hollow, 67 composite curve number for Poplar Springs. Prior Cove comes in at 62, and then 71 for Mullins Cove. And so you could go back, take that land cover that we have from 2016 and then 2020, and you look at the, calculating the curve numbers for each one of those. And so here's where we can definitely see that we're not seeing a whole lot of landscape change there. I mean, the curve number went from 71.3 to 71.67. We did see an increase in precip. 61 for Happy Hollow, 2016, 61, 2020. So not much change. Poplar Springs, 67, 67 again. So very little change across the board. So really, when we looked at the two factors looking at flow rates, it would pretty much be an indicator that it's your precip driving using just this model. I mean, this isn't saying that a rock harvesting area isn't going to generate erosion if it doesn't have BMPs in place, or if you've got a clear cut and you don't have your BMPs in place, that there isn't going to be erosion. But looking at the landscape, there's the full watershed scale. These factors don't show to be significant for at least a non-point source model like this. The hydro analysis summary, I think I hit most of the main points, but the key points again, minimal changes were observed on the landscape. Rainfall did increase, and then the limitation of the models is we're not looking at variability. So those microbursts, the big rainfall events, or any potential climatic changes, it's not taking that into account. But it would appear that those are more driven by precip and not by the land use in these cases. And then just, a nice report for each of the watersheds. We have the same kind of trend line, which I don't know, most of you remember 2016, that was when it was bone dry around here anyways. I know we had fires in North Hamilton County that year everywhere. So, we see that across the board. So yes, we had some significant events in between, but the general trend was from dry to wet. So not seeing a lot of variation there. And then the last piece, so we kind of have our stream flow, and then related to that would be the sediment analysis. how much sediment loading are we going to get? And so consultants that we worked with used the good old revised universal soil loss equation, or Russell. And it basically takes rainfall factors, soil erodibility factors from NRCS, USDA data. We calculate the slope length of the landscape. So it's using that LiDAR data to come up with essentially slopes and the relationship between that and where water accumulates. And then we combine all that with the land cover data that we have. So we have two scenarios, 2016, 2020. And then we did not use a practice factor. That would be if you had, retention mapped out, or any diversions or culverts, channelization, anything that would change that kind of runoff pathway. And then that gives you your estimated average annual soil loss. So again, the key is taking that remotely sensed data, pairing it with all of these factors, which this is, published, kind of official within the hydrology community, the runoff factors for the different land cover classes. So we're able to take our data and get these erosion management factors included. So when we combine all that, really it's this bottom number, which is most interesting. So it's the percent change between sediment delivery between 2016, 2020. So, seeing a 2% change, and again, a lot of what we were detecting on the landscape level that had changed was down here by the river. So, we had some actually reforestation and some areas that we detected in that land cover, but it looked like most of the change could be, accounted for activity down here. Poplar Springs, unfortunately, right on the edge of two images there. But same kind of thing, except we did have much more agricultural activity here. So there was a difference between 16 and 20. There's a lot more barren open soil. And then, there was some of the activity up here with harvesting, but really it was mostly this agricultural land use change that we saw down in the valley that pushed, potentially a 17% increase in potential runoff or sediment load. And then Prior Cove, we actually have the opposite. You have up on top of the mountain where we had barren soils and shrubland after timber harvest. Those have grown back in. So we have, according to the model, a reduction in the potential amount of soil or sediment loading in the stream. And again, I'll point out that doesn't account for point location. So, it's looking at the entire land use across the watershed. So I'm not saying that a rock harvesting operation is not going to contribute to a sediment load, but with this model, you can't detect the impact of that. It's much more of almost like a point source where you're looking for runoff directly below the site. And then Mullins Cove, this was interesting. So this is the one that we were surprised because this was going to be our reference stream, but it was all of the harvesting activity and just the function of the model. When we increase the amount of barren soil with this model, that predicts an increase in sediment. Again, it's not looking at any best management practices or erosion control that's implemented around that site. But if unmitigated and using the inputs and the classes that we had, we see an increase, in the potential sediment loading in that particular area. So briefly, just to go through, it's kind of, obviously this technology can be used to not only regulate permits, to guide field sampling on the monitoring side, and then to manage non-point pollution pressures at watershed scale. So again, you're still going to have the need for the point source and making sure that forestry activities or rock harvesting activities are doing what they need to do to maintain at the point source level. But as far as at the watershed scale, we can measure the non-point very well with this type of technology. Rock harvesting did not present a significant source of runoff or sediment using the selected models. And I've mentioned it again just a second ago. It's more of the point source pollution problem. Increasing and measuring land use change over a larger period of time could demonstrate an increase in surface runoff. So if we look at maybe the last 20 to 30 years, for example, it would be interesting to see, if those broader cumulative bigger landscape changes have impacted. But, with the models we selected, we didn't see that significant impact over the 5-year period. And then, these models were directly influenced greatly by the land cover data sets. So by increasing the frequency of capturing and updating the land cover data, I think it's going to give you a whole new capability of creating a very robust models. You pair an updated land cover data set with recent field samples, and it's something that we couldn't do 10 years ago, but you could do now. There's a whole next level of really kind of coordinating field work and modeling with updated land cover data. And then the models used in the study were not field verified, so we didn't have people out measuring sediment in the streams. I think related to that talking point I just shared, I think this would be a great opportunity for ongoing research, something that either UTC or Swanee or some of the other local universities could take this and run with it and really try to help develop this next generation of coordinated, land cover and field sampling efforts. And now for the best part. So I do want to show how we bring all this together and open up. So this is, I'm going to expand the view. This is taking all of the change detection data, how we kind of pull it together. So again, that red or the magenta color is an area where we measured loss of vegetation or exposed soil or bare earth. And then the green areas are where we're getting that, regrowth, revegetation. So we'll go back to the example we had here, looking at Jasper Highlands, and just gives you an idea, of the level, even with it not being, like 2 or 3 inch resolution imagery, you can do a lot with this 4 meter resolution imagery, enough to where you can count, every single structure that's been built over a period of time. You can monitor, this is a conservation easement. We can monitor, if we have a boundary encroachment into the easement. We can look at this timber harvest is beginning to reforest, regrowth. And then this is interesting when we pull in some of the other data that's in GIS. So let's, we can go get the TDEC water resource permit database and pull it in. And so I know that this is a rock harvesting operation. And if I wanted to, I could follow the links that TDEC includes to pull up the permit information and look at the footprint, which, real quick. So, I mean, it's a live site and get you everything you want to know about that permit. And then you can monitor over time the footprint of the permit and see where any of these are going. There's another rock harvesting operation. And again, we took these and built those into our land cover data. So, I mean, they were fully captured, but still didn't show up as significant using those models we had. But we can go through and look at the operation and then the footprint and the extent. So not being too much big brother or the eye in the sky, but I mean, I think it's a technology that can be used to influence and to create efficiency and do some good. It's really neat. One last example here. I love looking down in the valley because there's just so much change with all the agriculture. It's really neat to see the different crops over the 2 years, what's been harvested, what was regrowing at the time of the year. And then again, this is a 2-year span, but it can be done monthly. You can go through and look at what's changed over the last 30 days. But for this study, we were really looking at that difference, 2016 to 2020 in 2-year increments. Any questions? That was a lot, over a year's worth of work. And, I don't do justice to all the hydro work that the team at Geosyntek could definitely do, but we will have a technical write-up and report that will have much more of the detail on the models and the assessments. So I'll be handing that off to the development district, but yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I guess what I took from it, and it never really dawned on me, it should have. I mean, we know that when they lost all this, Marion log area, yeah, it's going to be devoid of greenery and vegetation, but it never thought it grows back. So when Andy was when we went through this, he and I and Chad, I guess that's what stunned me is I thought it would have a larger
Last day, yeah.
But then, like I said, I forgot it grows back. So over a year's period, 2-year period, it's revegetated and the runoff is slowed down. So I guess that was what really struck me. I think that's why I didn't put it so much.
Well, I think, yeah, that's the opportunity where you can monitor, and when you detect that big change in activity, you can go out and you can make sure that those management practices are in place, and then make sure that things are being mitigated, growing back, and managed well, so that they don't remain a long-term problem. But, yeah, definitely. We'll send the link.
Is vegetation, I guess if they're seeing this vegetation go back where the rock is harvested.
Does it grow back where the rocks are harvested? It doesn't show up as much. Those footprints are there from 2016 and they remained in 2020. Now there's maybe on the edge. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you took a rock away if there was any soil there for a while.
We saw a couple examples on the edges. There was some green over that period where we detected some regrowth, but no, the footprints of where they're hauling or removing rock, those pretty much stay there on the side.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Because I was thinking that this would be something over there.
Yes, I'm curious and listening to this, more rainfall.
Yeah.
Getting more rain off the sediment.
That's where we left it
The
as.
sediment that's coming off of the mountain, that's getting stuck in these branches and creeks and stuff. Is there a way to measure how much more we've got or picked up the depth in those branches from 16 to 20 because of the increased rainfall?
You should be able to. It would take more field work.
Yeah.
And stream.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's really, and that's where I think if you take the model and then now have a team go out and do this, connect the two.
Because I think that's one of our biggest problems. I mean, everything he's doing is great, but I think what's affecting us in the valley is going to be Justin in South Pittsburgh, is the depth that branch has increased and is continuing to increase, which is bringing, I could use Happy Hollow as an example. That last big flood we had, it brought the depth of that creek out of level of the road.
Yeah. So it's just the infill, you're changing your channel, stream channel.
And I guess I don't know this, and we might have to ask the geo sedimentation of a creek bank and a stream. Is it like tree rings? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
it can be the right geology. I mean, you can tell, but again, that's why.
Goes back to your point. You could go back and say, well, this happened here. Then there's another layer. I didn't know it's like a tree ring or not. So.
Yeah. I think being able to pair it with land cover data at the same time would be. It's a neat opportunity.
Chad, let's go forward.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that agriculture has been a great surprise the last 50 years to prevent soil erosion. We've gone to so much no-till, but your imagery, differentiation between bare soil versus no-till fields.
No, I mean, if there was vegetation present, there was a certain cutoff to where we said, okay, this is a harvested field, and then, just a certain level. So I don't,
So
4 meter, I don't know.
There's not many, plowed fields out there now.
Yeah.
It's virtually all the row crop agriculture is no-till now.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be something we can definitely look at for improvement. So.
Yeah, and we had a question online from Brian. Yes, there were 2 different years for both sensing layers from the same time of year.
Yes, so we did September across the board and all that, and that's where we were getting some harvest of certain crops at that time. But yeah, good question. Forgot to point that out.
Well, maybe I don't think that this would you think this conflict is? I don't know. I'll look and see. I mean, if that's something everybody in the room would be interested in, going to phase 2, I guess, with Andy and with partnering with the university or research university to do some field sampling. I would imagine that'd be in environmental science.
Yep.
We go with or interdisciplinary or somebody.
Yeah. We were doing that for the whole valley, a few years ago, and it was looking mainly at trying to identify septic.
That
That was not, okay, I could not remember.
we have that data.
Yeah, I knew.
We work with them in Swanee.
Yeah.
That was out.
Uh, Chris was up there. Yeah.
I mean, we'll look at any level if y'all are interested. If I shake their heads, I guess that's a yes. So I will coordinate that. Chad, I thought Marion, I guess. This was county. Yeah. So they have anything else for me? All right. Thank y'all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank y'all so much. We'll get that data and maybe work with Dan and see if we can't put this, maybe